Good afternoon and welcome. I hope you can all hear me okay. My name is Brian O'Kennedy. I'm the Managing Director of Clearstream Solutions, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. The title of our webinar today is Shaping Your ESG and Sustainability Reporting Journey, and staying ahead of the reporting curve, which is an increasing challenge for us as we see many new initiatives and frameworks and standards and regulations emerge in this ESG and sustainability space. For today, we have a very exciting agenda for you, a very tight agenda. So just in terms of what we're going to cover, my colleague Shane McGann is going to take us through the reporting overview. So sustainability reporting, all you ever wanted to know about ESG standards. And then George, we're delighted to be joined today by George from GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative, which has been a leading light in the sustainability framework strategy for over 20 years now. So delighted to have George along today. And then typically the highlight of all of these sessions is when we get to talk to the practitioners themselves. And I'm delighted to say today we have Susan McGarry, who's the Managing Director at Ecocem Ireland, and Outi Marin, who's the Head of Sustainability Reporting at Smurfit Kappa. Two organizations that it's fair to say are at maybe different stages of maturity in their responsible business journey and reporting. So it'll be very interesting to hear from them as to how they're managing that journey. When we started Clearstream about 12 years ago, I remember talking to the head of CSR in a very large financial institution about their sustainability report, and she proudly announced that they had done the sustainability report for their employees. I was noting the fact that there were very few KPIs in the report. In fact, there was a significant lack of KPIs, but lots of nice pictures of the employees participating in various CSR events. And I suppose, to be fair, back 10 years ago, that's what a sustainability report probably looked like. The expectations and requirements now of ESG reporting are a lot more rigorous, and there's expectations are a lot clearer and more succinct. So we're going to hear a lot about that today. At Clearstream, when we're asked to help companies with the sustainability reports, like all good consultants, we'll come up with a 6-step process. So you can have a look at this afterwards, but essentially, like any change management process in your business, you've got a plan for it. So you need to set out from the beginning, understanding what your goals are. You need to engage with your stakeholders, define your key KPIs, and then measure. A measurement is obviously key. And then only then do you get to look at the different frameworks and how you might lay that out. So we always suggest that companies start with the data and build up, and then before they consider how to publish their final report. In terms of sustainability and ESG topics in general, it's a very, very wide subject. So for the business people, and I sympathize with the likes of Outi and Susan, who are trying to grapple with the whole range of different topics that are out there. We have general sectoral issues that we need to take into account. We have general economic issues and societal issues. We have sectoral issues in our own business, and then we'll have specific issues relating to our organization. All of these are relevant to our ESG reporting, and we need to put these through some form of a prism. And typically the prism is one where we review the impact from both a stakeholder's perspective and from an organizational perspective. And that defines obviously the importance and criticality and what is typically called the materiality of the issues that we're looking to. So this is how companies assess the relevance and prioritize the significance of these issues. And many of you on the call will have carried out various types of materiality assessments. So bringing all of those wide subjects through our business and stakeholder prism and prioritization into our final sustainability report. Finally, just a few words we again would recommend to people that they keep in mind when they're developing an effective sustainability story in their report, to keep the following items in mind. So first of all, very critical to be able to talk about your organization's commitment. Transparency is key. I always look for challenges, organizations that are prepared to talk about the issues and challenges that they're having, not all the wonderful stuff that's going really well. That's key, that transparency. The legacy, what are we leaving behind us? A critical, important part of any sustainability or ESG journey is that we consider the legacy. Monitoring progress, KPIs, builds that credibility and authenticity, a key issue and a key word for us in our ESG journey, authenticity. And finally, the report needs to be accessible, and increasingly accessibility means that it needs to be in a digital format that can be screened and scanned by various content and sustainability ratings and other organizations who are reading our reports. So even if we think that there's no audience out there, there are organizations that are out there looking to screen and assess our sustainability and ESG performance. So that's by way of introduction. I'm going to now hand over to my colleague Shay, who's going to take us through the latest frameworks and standards. And there's a lot happening, obviously, as we know, at EU and other levels. So Shay, over to you.
Thanks, Brian. And hi, everyone. I'm Shay, and as Brian said, I'm responsible in Clearstream for sustainability strategy and reporting. And I'm just going to take you through the reporting landscape today. The jigsaw that is the global goals and principles, reporting frameworks, ESG ratings and indices, and regulation. As Brian said, it's a really busy and noisy space, and it's constantly evolving, which makes it really confusing for many companies to know where to start and to select the frameworks they're going to align to. So starting off, we've got the global goals, and I think the most common one here are the Sustainable Development Goals. Then we've got the reporting frameworks, and there should be lots of logos you recognise here: GRI, SASB, CDP. There's the supplier platforms like SEDEX and EcoVadis, and also the more traditional ISO standards. Then we've got ESG ratings and indices, and they're measuring corporates' ESG performance. So they're taking all the information that you feed into those reporting frameworks, and they're creating investment products with that data. And then finally, we've regulation. And this is EU regulation that's driving ESG integration. So the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, mandatory climate risk reporting, the EU taxonomy, and the Sustainable Financial Disclosures Regulation. I'm just going to go into that in a bit more detail now. So what's been happening in the last year, and what progress have we made towards a global corporate reporting system? There's been a lot happening at both a global and an EU level. I think there's clear ambition to try and make it easier for companies and to bring sustainability reporting in line with financial reporting. So from a global perspective, I think there are just three key elements I've pulled out. The first is the work that the 5 main voluntary reporting organisations started last year with their shared vision. So that's GRI, SASB, the Climate Disclosure Standards Board, CDP, and the International Integrated Reporting Council. They announced the shared vision to work together to achieve a comprehensive corporate reporting system, and they outlined this approach in 2 papers they released last year. Then we have the International Business Council of the World Economic Forum, and they released a set of core and expanded stakeholder capitalism metrics. And these were supported by 120 of the world's biggest companies to kind of improve the consistency of reporting and to be able to track their progress against the SDGs. And then finally, we have the International Financial Reporting Standards Foundation, and they launched a consultation process last year on sustainability reporting, and they're now working towards establishing an International Sustainability Standards Board and to achieve a comprehensive corporate reporting framework with sustainability standards. Then from an EU perspective, again, lots going on. It's just finished. It's I suppose just to say, firstly, it's very much aligned to what's happening at a global level, but they are pressing forward with increased mandatory sustainability reporting for companies operating in Europe They've just completed their review of the Non-Financial Reporting Directive, and that this has been replaced with a proposed Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. And just a few key elements of this new directive. It's going to cover all ESG topics and will require companies to consider double materiality. So not only will you have to look at how your company impacts on the wider society and the environment, but you'll also have to look at how sustainability issues impact your company. It's going to apply to a much wider pool of companies, so all large companies and some listed SMEs. They'll introduce assurance requirements, and they're also going to support the shift to digital. So tagging of sustainability information will be required in your reports. And then they expect that the companies will publish their reports in accordance with the standards by 2024. So we'll see the first reports then. And then finally, just to say that this regulation complements a whole range of other reporting regulation that's coming from the EU at the moment, like the EU taxonomy regulation and the Sustainable Financial Disclosures regulation for financial market participants. And then finally, from a national perspective, this new regulation, it won't be required to be transposed by member states. It'll be directly applicable. And the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment launched its public consultation on the directive last week, and it's open for stakeholder responses until June 23rd. So I'm just going to go through a few of the main frameworks, just in the interest of time. But as you start to get into like each sector, there are even more. But this should be a good start. So firstly, you've got GRI, and GRI provides companies with a set of standards to report their ESG information to all stakeholder groups. It's a holistic approach to reporting and strives to provide information in a way that's comparable and emphasizes transparency and accountability. It requires companies to conduct a materiality assessment to identify the topics that are material in their business. Then we have SASB, and they provide industry-specific standards. There are 77 sectoral standards in total, and they help companies select the topics that are likely to impact the financial performance of their business. So instead of looking at how the company impacts on the wider environment and society, it's looking inward on how sustainability issues impact the company. So both GRI and SASB, the standards are free to download from the website, so there's no scoring or cost. Then we've got CDP, and CDP is the global platform for environmental disclosures. And this is done through a number of questionnaires on climate, water and forestry. And it offers companies the ability to benchmark themselves against their peers. So there's a scoring process. And because of that scoring process, there is a cost. And it also has a really good supply chain program. Then we have the SDGs. So I'm sure you're all familiar with these. They're a broad set of 17 goals that were originally meant for use by countries and cities. However, there's been a big uptake of them for the use in the business community, as they're really good for engaging with a wide range of stakeholders. Below the 17 goals sit 169 targets. So it's going to be interesting to see how companies track against their progress against these targets. And there's more and more guidance emerging on how the different frameworks link to the SDGs. Then we've got the TCFD. So the TCFD provides guidance on how to disclose the impact of climate-related risk on your business. It helps companies report on governance, strategy, risk management, and kind of gives metrics and targets you can use. And this guidance is incorporated into lots of the other frameworks like GRI and SASB and CDP. So if you're using those frameworks, then you're kind of automatically aligning to the TCFD. Then we've got the UN Global Compact, and this is a voluntary initiative, or kind of like a CEO pact, and it aims to help companies implement 10 sustainability principles in their business. And they cover the topics like the environment, human rights, labour and anti-corruption. And it also requires companies to do an annual progress update each year. So there's no fee for smaller companies, but there's a fee for large companies. And then finally, there's the Climate Disclosure Standards Board. And this is another reporting framework for environmental information, but it's wider than climate and kind of includes natural capital. So then I'm just going to leave you with a couple of nice graphs that I think really help people kind of put the different frameworks into perspective. This plots the prescriptiveness of the frameworks and standards against the scope. So you'll see down in the bottom left-hand corner, you've got GRI. It's got a really broad scope, as in that it includes environmental, social and governance. But it's got a somewhat flexible approach in that you do a materiality assessment, so you can pick the topics that you want to report on. And this is in contrast to CDP, which is up in the top right-hand corner. Its scope is narrower, so it's just environmental, and because it's a questionnaire, it's much more prescriptive. And finally, I took this graph from the Climate Disclosure Standards Board because I think it gives you a really nice idea of how the different reporting frameworks fit together and how they're all, like how it's kind of fitting in with financial information. So you'll see on the right hand side, you've got GRI, and that looks at the impact a company's activities are having on society and the environment. So it's got that really broad range of sustainability disclosures. Then you've got like SASB and the CDSB, which are a smaller subset, and they look more at how sustainability issues are impacting the company. Then on the right hand side, you've actually got the normal financial reporting. And then the little roof on the top is the integrated reporting framework, which tries to bring sustainability information together with financial information in your annual report. So I hope that provides a good overview, and you can take some of those graphs away. And I will now hand over to George, who's going to get into all the detail of the GRI standards.
And just before we hand over to George, just to mention and thank you, we already have a number of questions coming into the chat box. So keep the questions coming, some really good questions. So we will be back to those. So keep the questions coming in the chat, and feel free to turn on your cameras, but we would prefer that if you can mute yourself as well, please. So thank you. George, welcome.
Thank you very much, Brian, and thanks, Shay, for that great overview of the landscape and a lot of the components that I think definitely need to continue to be clarified to help support organizations looking to respond or report these things. So I'm very honored to be here. My name is George Harrington. I am a manager in our corporate and stakeholder engagement team, which really means that I get the opportunity to speak to a very broad group of our stakeholders around the world, and specifically in Ireland, the UK, France, and Italy at the moment. So I have the opportunity today to speak to you a bit about GRI, as well about the standards, our core product, and hopefully be able to answer some questions that you may have. And if not, then we can certainly find time to answer those if we do run out of time. So I'll try to keep to the clock, Shay and Brian. So I'll get started quickly. So as a quick update and on a quick background, let's say on who GRI is. So we are an independent organization, and we really pioneered the idea of sustainability reporting, as Brian mentioned earlier, about 20 years ago. And we now offer really the global disclosure framework that helps support companies to be more transparent about their sustainability performance, as mentioned already by Shay, on the external areas, so on the environment, on the economy, on society. We really look to help any business, so irrespective of where they are, their size, their sector, disclose these impacts and also provide those really relevant insights for a company and their stakeholders. And this can help inform decision-making and improve the environmental, social, and as well financial outcomes. A little bit of a roadmap here. So we started back in the late 90s, and it was really born out of this need for transparency. There was the Exxon Valdez disaster that I think brought a lot of things to light. And so people wanted to demand for corporate behavior to really be scrutinized and obviously improved. So this kind of began the journey, and through it all, we have in 2016 launched what is our core product and the free public good, which is the GRI Standards. And as well, you can see a bit more of the recent history. It's been a great journey of bringing in the stakeholder input and making sure we maintain a very relevant global framework. A resource here that I'll let you go into in your own time, but it does show a bit more of insight on the most widely used standards for sustainability reporting. So both for new reporters and let's say leaders in this space. So it's done by KPMG. It was conducted a survey, and they've been doing this, I think, since 1993. So a long time that they've been looking at this and seeing these trends. And the latest edition, published in the last year, looked at 52,000 companies in 52 countries. And again, you can go into a lot of the detail there. I think from our perspective, what it showed and highlighted for us is that 80% of companies worldwide are now reporting on the idea of sustainability. And then again, from GRI's perspective, among that 80% that were surveyed, GRI came out still as the dominant global standard for the sustainability reporting. But again, the link is on this slide. There was also, I've been told, will be shared as well, so you can go into that and find lots of these nice takeaways, as well as takeaways on SDGs and other reporting areas. But I'll now go a little bit into the standards themselves. Really, a key to the standards is our approach to it, and this is what's been allowed to really make the standards resonate and be as robust as they are, and that's the multi-stakeholder approach that we apply. And that means we bring in the inputs from a very large range of constituencies, including civil society, business, investment institutions, labor, and media institutions. And this approach really ensures that we have the participation and the expertise of the broad stakeholder group that really exist in the world of sustainability. And that helps in the development of the GRI standards. It's also important to mention that the body responsible for updating and maintaining the GRI standards is called the Global Sustainability Standards Board, and they're our independent standard setting body. So they're able to run this process very thoroughly, very transparently in the public, for the public good. For those of you that have not seen it before, the GRI standards are really made into a modular set that you see here, which include the 3 universal standards on the top and 34 topic specific standards, which I'll go to in a moment. But these are publicly available and free, and as Shay mentioned in her overview. I think what's really important to note with this is to look at this broad range that was mentioned. And yes, this is a very busy slide. I'm not going to go through each one in a lot of detail. But a lot of the times when people see this, they ask kind of where do I begin? How would I even get started in this space? Or I'm a little bit lost as I try to figure out these things. But if I go back a slide, the simplest answer, and just if you want to explore this a bit further, is in the 101 series. And that lays out some of the key principles of sustainability reporting, and there's 10 of them. Again, due to time, we will not go into all of these in more detail, just mention a few in highlights. But I think what this highlights to me, and what the important thing to remember, is that sustainability reporting is a process. It's not a tick box exercise. It's not there to just be something that you do and then wait for the next year to come around. It is a process, and through following the principles outlined in the process, we truly believe that businesses can understand their impacts and have a real crack at making those more positive and working on that balance as well, on identifying where there may be areas for improvement. But the materiality concept is a very key one for GRI and all of the standards out there, and as mentioned by Shay as well. And for us, that materiality is requiring organizations to consider their full impacts on the wider world. So rather than solely focusing on perhaps the financial impacts on the business itself, which are still important, but we also make sure that they're considering which of those impacts are happening on the environment, on the economy, and on society as a whole. So this is really almost a complementary, and we're very excited that there has been a move towards more mandatory disclosure on this space, and a discussion about bringing the parity of not only financial materiality impacts, but also sustainability impacts. And as Shay said earlier as well, it's that balance of making sure you get to understand both sides of the impacts that you are having as a business externally, and what's happening externally is impacting the business. So it's very much a key element of it. Again, these are all gone through in much more detail. I mentioned balance is my favorite because a key part, and some people will say, well, what's GRI doing, letting companies greenwash? Well, it's not obviously what we do. We don't allow companies to do anything like this, but it's through the principle of balance, which requires companies to really look not only at the good things they're doing, but also to understand and talk about some of the things where they need to improve. And that balance, I think, really drives even more meaning to these reports. So again, more detail on a lot of these areas, but that's one that I like to focus on. Some of the benefits, well, I think ones that we like to mention is that the benefit for new reporters and leaders in this field is that they do integrate and reference global policy. So governments and market regulators do use the GRI standards, you reference them. I think at the moment there's the carrots and sticks resource, and there's 168 policies in about 67 countries that reference or require the use of the standards. And that's because of that modular structure, which allows these regulations or these public policy bodies to reference specific areas of the standards. Secondly, it is that flexibility and the ability to be future-proof. And so again, that modular structure allows us to update specific standards each time it becomes up to its turn, and also in line with world developments and changes in the landscape, as was mentioned earlier as well. So it is again that modular structure that plays a big part here. And before that, so if you look back on the timeline, when we had to update the guidance, it was a big project and everything would be reviewed and updated at the same time, whereas now we can maintain and update a bit more specifically, as well as making sure we respond to what our stakeholders need a bit more quickly. Another benefit, obviously, is that they do represent that global common language. So the GRI standards is one common framework that can meet all the reporting needs, from comprehensive reporting issues all the way to topic-specific disclosure. So it's not only the what, but also the how to do this. And the fact that sustainability reports based on the standards can be used to benchmark organizations to each other and performance concerning laws, norms, codes, performance, and all of these voluntary initiatives as well. But lastly, the standards are developed with that credibility and robustness as a key part of it, and that's through the GSSB, which I mentioned, and through the transparent process of developing the standards. So I think one of the areas that is most important to the development of a standard is the public comment period, and that is when the project working group, full of the experts and topic specific players in the space, they put out a draft of a standard. And this can be looked at by all stakeholders everywhere in the world, and they can provide their feedback, which is indeed incorporated or reviewed before a standard gets released to be used. So again, that applies to that space. So speaking a little bit of the kind of latest or revised GRI standards and where we're going as a standard setter. So the first one, and I guess one of the most important ones that's going to affect all companies that use the GRI standards, is the revision to the universal standards. So because the universal standards do apply to all organizations using our framework, the update to this is going to have a very substantial, let's say, an important change. We're bringing in new and important requirements on human rights, on due diligence reporting, as well as aligning more even further with the UN guiding principles and the OECD guidelines. So there's a lot of information on this. You can see the revision standard if you do like on our website. We're currently past the public comment period, and that standard is going to be, I think, launched more or less around October, November this year. So an exciting space, but also important to note that for those that are just starting to report, or maybe in their first year or two of reporting, not to worry. It doesn't mean that when this is launched, it's going to make you have to change everything right away. There is a lead time to understand these changes. We'll have lots of support and resources that do that, and I know our members will be well informed as well, like Clearstream, to ensure that this transition happens as smoothly as possible. Another exciting development is the first GRI sector standards. So as imagine, and as been asked for a long time, the different sectors have different impacts on the economy, on the environment and society. So for this reason, we launched a few years ago a big effort to really offer more standardized reporting on sector specific impacts. Now, these are all supposed to be used together. It doesn't replace the standards or looking at your materiality, but it can be used in conjunction to help inform what your stakeholders can expect from your reports. The first one that's going to be coming out later this year will be in the oil and gas sector. And we also have a public comment period starting in, I think, actually this week for the agriculture and fishing sector. So that's one where if you're interested or you know someone that's interested, you can still definitely get involved in that space and also get an idea of what these will look like. And this infographic here, I should say, this gives a bit of an idea of what that will be. So it is the universal standards that can be used with sector standards to help identify some of the material topics, but also to make sure that you're using the identified material topics through stakeholder engagement to report on those as well. And this slide really just talks a little bit about some of the areas where we already aligned. So they also add to that robustness of us. So that includes the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, the ILO Conventions, and the OECD Guidelines for Multinational Businesses. I think what's very important also for us, and again, going back to Shay's slides where it showed a number of the players in this landscape, is that the standards are compatible with a number of these already. And that is either through linkage documents directly, or through, let's say, the publication with SASB that we did earlier this year, which shows how organizations can report with both, because we understand that there is a demand coming from businesses, stakeholders, specifically investors, for that SASB information. And so we are working with them to make sure that we don't create even more work for reporting organizations, but that organizations that are using the standards can easily find that narrative to also talk about their SASB disclosures. Another resource that I think is always interesting to talk about is the really 3 publications we had on reporting on the SDGs. Now, this is something we did with UNGC to really find out and introduce this idea of reporting on those. They were set at a state level, and now obviously there are a lot of buzzwords in to how businesses can work towards that, how different institutions can work on that. And so these 3 publications really do outline how business can consider to do that. So the first one's the analysis of goals and targets, is very much a thick dictionary of all the goals and all the targets. So again, an interesting read perhaps, but also you can find which ones, and you can go through and identify which ones maybe are more interesting to your organization. And then there's the practical guide, which gives you kind of a step-by-step process on how you might do that. And from our perspective, if you're reporting with GRI and you want to know maybe which SDGs you do have an impact on, if it's not already obvious, well, then you can also link your material topics to SDGs and specific targets. And similarly, if you know some SDGs that you want to work towards, well, this document allows you to understand which disclosures you can use to report on your progress or impact towards that. The third one is really looking at what investors are asking for when it comes to reporting on SDGs. So again, bringing in that lens and making sure that companies can discuss that. Finally, a quick slide on some of the areas that we do look to support, because we understand that the standards are a very big resource. The one that I think is always, and really the reason I'm here, is the GRI community, and Clearstream's a member. I mean, it brings together organizations around the world who not only use the GRI standards, but that understand the importance of, transparent business and sustainability reporting. We have a number of services that also support specific areas in a reporting organization's either report or the process. We have some reporting tools you can find on our website, and those are softwares that allow or support specific areas in the reporting cycle, and then also training and coaching, which we use certified training partners and our GRI Academy to really bring and increase the knowledge of reporters around the world. But I think with that, I will say thank you. I'll take a little sip of water, and I don't know if I'm opening now for questions, Brian, or if it's at the end as well, timing wise.
I think we'll come back to you. We'll include you in the panel, George. So please, when we get to Q&A stage for the panel, do have a couple of questions that have come in already that I think you'll be able to contribute to. So thank you very much for that. And as I said, yeah, as you mentioned, at Clearstream, we're very proud to be a member of the GRI community, and certainly both ways, it's a very valuable resource. So I'd encourage others to consider it. You know, we certainly find the engagement from GRI and with GRI very useful. So now I'd like to welcome our two practitioners, the panelists, and these are the people who go through the practical pain of managing this wide, broad ESG reporting issue. So I'd like to welcome Susan McGarry. As I said, Susan is Managing Director of Ecocem, and Outi Marin, who's the Head of Sustainability Reporting at Smurfit Kappa. So I'm going to start with you, Susan. So I think it's fair to say, if you don't mind me saying so, that you're at a relatively early stage in that journey around reporting, but maybe just firstly around Ecocem, because I know as a company you're hugely committed to sustainability and climate, and your products are all about decarbonization. So maybe a little introduction to yourself and Ecocem, and then where you are on your reporting journey.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So I'm the Managing Director of Ecocem Ireland. So we are part of the wider Ecocem group. The parent company is Ecocem Materials, where it's an Irish company, but we've got plants in France, in the Netherlands, and then import terminals in Sweden and the UK. Our main product is ground granulated blast furnace slag, so it's a bit of a mouthful, GGBS. It is a byproduct from the steel industry, and it's basically used as a partial replacement for ordinary Portland cement. So cement is a particularly carbon intensive industry. It's responsible for about 8% of global CO2 emissions. In Ireland, the cement sector is responsible for 4% of our total greenhouse gas emissions. So it's quite a big chunk from one industry. So the use of GGBS, it's used mainly for its engineering and technical benefits to lengthen the lifespan of concrete. But also a lot of the time now, more so because of its environmental credentials, because it's seen, there's a UN report, there's many expert reports on this, that it's the best available technology for lowering the embodied carbon of concrete. There's very little else currently available that can decarbonize the cement sector as much as clinker substitution. So clinker would be the main constituent of cement. So that's what you dig out from the ground, burn at very high temperatures, and turns into your cement. So by replacing some of that clinker with a recycled material like GGBS, you're making a direct impact to the carbon emissions of that sector. The cement sector is trying to decarbonize at the moment. They've got a European roadmap outlining how they're going to get to net zero emissions by 2050. And a large part of it is reliant on carbon capture and storage and green hydrogen coming online. We don't know if that will be the case by 2030, but we do know that there's immediate savings that can be done right now in this decade using clinker substitution. So that being said, that's what Ecocem is all about. We sell a low carbon product. We try to influence change within the cement sector and the wider built environment sector. And because from our market-based emissions point of view, we're making such a difference, it's important that you also look internally. And the driving kind of phrase behind our reporting was our business process has to match our business vision. And we weren't exactly doing that. Like, we were doing a lot of good things, but it was kind of scatty and all over the place. There was no formal structure. So my role before running the Irish business was the group sustainability manager, and that role was created because I said, we need to do this, we need to do some reporting, we need to get some structure around it. It took a huge amount of convincing at the time that, you know, do we really want to put out so much public information? Like, we were in a very much a growth phase, and there's rapid expansion plans, new technologies, innovation, all that. Do we want to put a lot of that information out there? And thankfully they let me run with it. And so I kind of started this journey in 2018 based on 2017 information. and had initial chats with Brian, but because it was kind of new, I didn't get a huge amount of investment for this. So it was like, do it kind of as best you can with little to no budget. So a few little consultations with Brian. He gave me the best guidance he could. We aligned with the GRI as much as we could without going with GRI. We did our materiality assessment, which was fairly limited. I think we only had a couple of external stakeholders involved. And we produced our first report in 2018. It was called Vision 2020. So I was kind of giving myself sort of a 3-year space to see what we could do. We'd always reported to the Carbon Disclosure Project. That was one good thing that we were always doing, but it wasn't a really planned out response, you know, pulling together everything. So we took a year out, and we then applied last year. With the help again of Clearstream, we said, look, we want to take this seriously. We should be an A-rated company, and we should be a global kind of thought leader like the other A-rated companies are. And we moved up from a D to a B in 1 year, which showed how much actual work we were doing that we weren't reporting on or capturing. So thankfully then, because of the success of that first report, it was like, well, this is our practice. We now do this reporting. It's now been used to gain investments, to improve kind of any sort of funding, a lot of the finance stuff, because we're in this growth phase, we're hugely into funding, grants, all that kind of stuff. And the sustainability report has been used in all of those meetings. We've recently had a €22.5 million investment from Breakthrough Energy Ventures, which is the Bill Gates founded fund for low carbon technology. All of that it's based not only on our product, but on who we are as a company as well. And a lot of that is to do with the fact that we have a coordinated approach to our sustainability strategy, and that we're reporting on it in a very clear and accessible way. So now, so I feel like I'm taking up the whole kind of chat here. At the next stage, as you said, we're very much at our early stage. We're now moving into the more kind of sophisticated level of reporting, and hopefully we'll kind of match Outi's level of disclosure at some point. But we're going to align with we're going to do the GRI reporting rather than our own kind of voluntary report. We're going to do it through GRI, and keep chasing our A rating in the Carbon Disclosure Project, set science-based targets around our carbon emissions. So it's really to formalise the structure now at this point.
Susan, thank you. That's I'm sure a lot of let's say people who are at early stage will have found that fascinating. And I think the progression and the journey that you've been on is refreshing, that you took those baby steps and started out and got confident and got good, and now ready to move on to the next phase. So well done. I know you, because it's a private company, or has been, you know, you're not necessarily, a lot of this is off your own path, that you've decided to voluntarily put yourself forward as self-selected. So excuse me, that's fantastic. And now maybe to the other end of the spectrum. I mean, I don't want to set you up, Outi, but certainly 11 years reporting GRI. You've had a phenomenal CDP response. I give the Smurfit report is a case study in best practice. But I know there's a journey here, right? So do you want to take us back, because you've been doing this for some time, and maybe your role and sustainability at Smurfit? I know obviously we're very proud of Smurfit in Ireland, the Smurfit Kappa, and your Better Planet program. So give you an opportunity to discuss that too.
Thanks, Brian, and thanks for inviting me to speak. Yeah, Smurfit Kappa is a 46,000 employee company with 8.5 billion euro turnover last year, and we produce annually about 13 million square meters of paper-based packaging and other solutions for our customers. So that's Smurfit Kappa in very nutshell, leading in Europe and leading in those markets where we are in the Americas as well, in cardboard packaging. Smurfit Kappa has been reporting in sustainability from 2007, and soon after we started reporting, we went into following the GRI standard. And when I joined the company in 2014, we moved at that time from core to comprehensive reporting. the standards that was available then, and now we are comprehensive standards. So that's what we do. That means that we do very thorough GRI reporting at Smurfit Kappa, and that's practically part of what we want to do. And if I say something about what sustainability means for us, it is actually we call it end-to-end sustainability, and it means that everything what we do, from sourcing our raw materials, producing our products, and the products being actually sustainable. And we do this also by taking care of our people, our communities, and at the same time striving for the best possible governance. So it's kind of a very holistic program that we do. Also very typical for Smurfit Kappa that we want to tick all the boxes. So that's kind of the thing for us. In paper sector, sustainability has been quite important for quite a while. So not only that we are a publicly traded company, we also are in the sector where you have had certain pressure of reporting and paying attention to sustainability quite a while. Smurfit Kappa maybe a little bit less than some of the competitors, but nevertheless, it is something that the industry alone and the sector alone has to pay attention to. So that, of course, drives in the background. In principle, reporting is, or good data and transparency is a huge basis for us in how we build our sustainability strategy, and nowadays also a huge part of our company strategy itself. We want to know what we are doing, and we want to be able to measure it, and we want to also offer to our stakeholders, and especially our customers, investors, something that they can practically have a tangible touch on. So measuring yourself well is a key. And I think that there, following a standard helps you to develop the systems, and we have actually rather developed internal systems of data collection. Some of them are very leading in the sector as well, and that gives us a good insight. And we have now over 12 years of really robust data that has been assured for us for those 11 years. So it is a good basis, and it gives us credibility and confidence to talk about sustainability. So we are already quite advanced, as said, but I wouldn't say that this is not a learning curve all the time. The standards are changing all the time a little bit. There is always a new tweak in there. There are new things that the stakeholders are asking for. So that's something that keeps us at least active, and you can't kind of just feel secure that you are doing things well, because you need to be going with the trends and the change. I would also say that doing this, focusing on sustainability reporting, even though it is, so we kind of separate our story and then the statutory disclosures, so that those go, the statutory stuff goes also into our annual report now. But then in the sustainability report, we have the opportunity to actually really tell the story of the company as well. And that's a nice thing that sustainability reporting gives to you as well, because it is, like Brian in the beginning said, it was pictures of people doing CSR and that was the report. So it is a way of, and it is a topic that has an emotion in it. So it hasn't started with the legal base like financial reporting. So the way how you build your report is very different, even though there are standards and there are shared opportunities or shared targets in the background. And I think that being at this stage, you kind of focus on a bit different things. It's no longer only about focusing on getting all of the data that you need behind you. It's also about how you tell it, It's about how you limit your stories and how you evidence it in increasingly growing for the increasingly growing demand. So those are maybe those things that I would say are different from just still continuously needing to be learning something. Also, when you are following the GRI standard, for example, and you are assured, like we are, we have a limited assurance, but for all of the data in our report, it is that first you go into the big chunks and the auditors look at how you deal with that. And we are at the stage where we sometimes think that, why are we looking at this thing? Because all the big picture is anyways fine. So it gets smaller and smaller and more detailed all the time, which is in its way a big challenge as well, because you need to be able to respond into more and more detailed questions and strive for transparency in there as well.
Very good.
So I think that's in short where we are. It's our 13th or 14th report actually. This year, the 2020 report, and we did a big change in it during the reporting season, and I'm happy to open that one up a little bit more, but I'm sure that Brian comes to those details in his questions.
Yes, I'd like to come back to you on a couple of topics there, and that some of the questions have come in around materiality and also maybe the assurance piece, because you've been through the process. But maybe Susan, I'll just coming back to you and maybe building into one of the questions that was asked, because I know you did in some way build in the SDGs into your report, and I guess Grania has asked us a question about, and it was Shay during a couple of weeks ago mentioned this wonderful topic. Well, it was a word called rainbow washing. I hadn't heard of it before, but essentially it's this idea of just splashing the SDGs, throw them on the page there, they look great, without really understanding what's happening in the background, and companies just reporting the positives without reporting the negatives. So maybe just talk a little bit about the SDGs, and then we can touch on this question of companies just using SDGs without fully understanding the targets.
Yeah, so we, as I said, our materiality assessment at the beginning was limited to all of our internal employees. So everyone completed it, and then a couple of customers and clients. From that, kind of we saw kind of common trends between what people considered important and what was important to kind of general society. We grouped those because this was a voluntary report, our first one. We're like, how are we going to do this? So we decided to group them into kind of core category areas, and then kind of did a review of the SDGs and said, okay, like we tried not to do the rainbow washing, great phrase, and we're like, well, what SDGs can we actually work on within those categories of issues that we have of importance and that we can work towards changing. So that's as far as we went. And in terms of the good and the bad, that was very difficult, like say the second year, to be like, okay, so we didn't perform in some of the areas, but we're out there now. You can't not do it. You got to say, we didn't do what we needed to do. And that's fine. I mean, the world didn't fall down around us when we said like we didn't achieve this target. So in terms of transparency, we've tried to do that. It is a difficult thing. I think it'd be easier if it was in a more structured way in the GRI way, because it's like you either did or you didn't. Whereas we could have been like, oh, we just won't talk about that target anymore, or we just won't talk about that sustainable development goal. Whereas we try to kind of the moral side of, you're going to do this. Once you've put the report out there and said, these are our targets, these are the core goals that we're trying to work towards within that, you're going to have to follow through on it the following year, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Just put it out there. So I'm probably not the best one on the sustainable development goals, because that's as far as we got. It wasn't a huge amount.
Yeah. Well, your employees will be the first ones to notice if there's a difference between what you're telling the world and what you're doing internally. So, and Outi, I know you mentioned you guys report the SDGs as well. If you've a thought on that, but I'm also interested in your materiality approach, because I think you've quite a comprehensive. Is that, do you recommend you start with a small number of material issues, or should you take the whole lot on and figure out what's important to your business?
Well, I think actually it's very interesting combination, the SDGs and materiality. I think they go sometimes hand in hand as well. And what I really like about the GRI, and I saw there was a question about the difference between GRI and SASB. One of those things is that you have to do your own materiality assessment in GRI when you follow GRI, but when you follow SASB, you have to follow so they made the sector materiality assessment for you. So for us at Smurfit Kappa, for example, actually making your own materiality assessment and renewing it after certain periods is a very important step, and from reporting perspective, I think materiality, first of all, it helps you to know what you need to do, and that is the way of not rainbow washing your stuff. So that's keeping it at line and not trying to go everywhere. So we've done different types of materiality assessments, and we have had different ways of engaging with our stakeholders to do that. So if I tell you what we did last time, maybe that's the best way. We actually engage quite widely with different areas in the materiality assessment. And for example, we structure it so that you do first kind of a desk study of all kind of documents and questionnaires and stuff like that, that you can study on your desk practically, to understand what actually shows you already what the other people are interested in your company. But at the same time, you are all the time following what the company itself does. So you take your strategy, you take your vision, you take your products, you take your production units, and you look what actually happens in there. So those are the core things that matter. Also your location geographically, because some of those things that might look really fancy and nice don't apply to you because you are not in a place where it's an issue. So that's one thing. Then, and in this, we have also legislation. We have questionnaires like CDP or other ESG questionnaires. And we also look into the GRI already at that point as well. And then it's the other area, which is kind of taking it live. And that is how we did it is we had 2 questionnaires. We asked our employees what they thought is material to the company. And then we also surveyed a bunch of our key stakeholders, mainly customers, suppliers, and investors, and asked what they think is material and what they would like to know about Smurfit Kappa in our sustainability report. So those questionnaires gave us data that you can also kind of work into a numeric tables and start to get some balance on things. And then we stress tested, and that practically a discussion between us and top management, where we think we are and where we should be, and how we see that all this data that we have gathered through these 2 different assessment types takes us. Okay. You cannot really not take into account what the desk study and the surveys give to you, but you can move certain elements a little bit here and there.
Okay, and I think what that suggests is that you own the process yourself and just build it bottom, take in all that feedback from everyone and create it yourself. There's no, there isn't one best practice solution out there that just fits everyone. I think that's a message, and I guess that adds authenticity and reality to it. Yes. I'm just conscious of the time, so I'm just going to very quickly go through. George, I want to give you 1 minute just to Any advice, somebody starting on the GRI process, what should they do?
I think a quick answer, I think we'd start with 101. And I know that sounds very basic, but I think there you'll get an understanding of what's involved and how to get some of those core principles down. But yeah, attending events like this certainly helps, right? Getting the practical experience from people that are doing it is so. Feel free to reach out to Outi and Susan. I'm offering their time for everyone. Yeah.
Susan, last one for you. What's next? What's the challenge this year that you're going to deliver on your sustainability reporting?
So we skipped last year's report due to COVID. That's the benefit of voluntary reporting. We've a bit of flexibility there. So we're going to cap off our Vision 2020. That should be out this summer. We're kind of targeting June, July. So that'll be 2019-2020's data. And we've done a huge overhaul on how we even monitor and measure our carbon emissions. We are hopefully doing a science-based target commitment as well this year, with the view to setting that actual target then hopefully next year. So our next stage for sustainability reporting will be a net zero roadmap, I reckon. I think that's where we're going, but there's a lot of that going on in the construction sector with, I don't know how much substance behind it. So we're trying to do it right, hold back on just launching something and trying to do it right first time. Yeah,
that whole net zero, carbon neutral out by 2030, 40, 50, whenever, is really driving significant change. And that's going to be, we're going to have to report against those metrics. So Outi, your last, what's your big challenge and push now? What's keeping you busy on the reporting front?
Well, I think we did a big push in the last report where we really went into fine-tuning our storytelling. So that was a really big thing. And we also included the TCFD and SASB reporting to our GRI-based report. But then the next thing is, again, that now that we focus on the story, the next challenge is going back to the data and the disclosures. So we are going to go through our report and find the gaps where we are not so great yet. So that's then the next thing. And we are looking into the SBTI, which is not easy at all, I can tell you that. So that's what we are focusing on, I think, the next round. And keeping the quality, because we've reached really a good point now. So now it's also the challenge is to actually stay there, which is not always so easy either.
Yes, the bar is being constantly raised. So thank you all very much. I promised we'd finish on time, and there's another broken promise. I've run a couple of minutes over. We have so many questions coming in, so apologies we didn't get to them all, but we will respond. We've had questions on assurance. We've had questions on incorporating. We dealt with SDGs, with questions on the number of issues to report, and then the link between GRI and SASB. So we'll try and get to those. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to come back to us, or indeed any of the speakers. To my colleagues, Shay and Grania, who put on a great show today, thank them. And to all the speakers, Outi, Susan, and George, for being with us. We will definitely have George back again to do more GRI stuff. And so all of you, thank you for joining us. We will be sending out the recording, and keep in touch and stay safe. I got my vaccine today about 2 hours ago. So for any of you who are worried about the vaccine, it works, it wasn't painful, and I'm still alive. So good luck, stay safe, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.